Well, look who it is. It's been a little while since I last posted a video like this, a long form type of content. Obviously took about a year and a half out of the Scrum Recap stuff, but I'm back. And I'm back for good. Obviously, you can see the new studio layout behind me. I mean, it's not much of a studio. It's a study which has been transformed into a new thing, which I'll call the Scrum Pit. I've got my picture of 2007, 2008 season, Shane Garrity there to wish us luck. And today I'll be bringing back the series, which I think a lot of people enjoyed back in the day, but I didn't really have time to do it. But I have much more time nowadays, which is why you're going to get much more consistent content. There's a whole content calendar. I've got a guy helping me as well, who's going to be supporting on a lot of these videos. And we're bringing back Fixing Your Club. But before we dive into it, I've actually got really exciting news because we have a sponsor, not just for this sort of Fixing Your Club series, but for a lot of videos upcoming. And I'm really excited to say that we're sponsored by Augmento Sports. That's who we're partnering with for a lot of these videos. Augmento Sports provide all sorts of high-level athletic training gear, tapes, protective gear in general, all that sort of stuff, which is really, really relevant for not just this channel, but the viewers of this channel, and especially those who are still playing grassroots sports or who might be professionals. Nice to see you. But they provide things like tapes and such like that, which I think are an absolute necessity going into any rugby season. So if you're a coach or a player and you're looking to stock up, moving into this pre-season and for upcoming training sessions, then definitely check out Augmento Sports. The link will be in the bio below. We've got a discount code as well, a 10% discount code. So if you use Scrum Recap 10 at checkout, you'll get 10% off your first purchase. So you obviously would have already seen what this Fixing Your Club episode is going to be about, and it's about Quins, who have had a very unusual season. Moving into this season, I actually did a bit of a deep dive way back when, and it's actually aged really, really well because some of the issues defensively and such like that, and even in the coaching staff, which I said were massive issues at the time, haven't been addressed. They've continued to plague the side, and they've ended up in this very middling, forgetful season. We've got plenty of other Fixing Your Clubs coming up. I know there's a couple of people that have requested teams in the URC, like Connacht and such like that, which I want to spend a little bit more time getting into and listen to a couple more fans of those clubs to understand what are the major issues from a day in, day out punter. But Quins is an interesting one. I think Quins are one of the more disappointing teams within the league this season. I think when they had their highs, they've obviously been incredible highs, lows, vice versa. You're going to see me looking down at a laptop throughout a lot of this video, because what I don't want to lose from this Fixing Your Club series is the analytical approach, the stuff which we get into a lot of detail regarding stats and what has actually hurt these sides over the last season or so. So realistically, despite having the massive ups last season of reaching the semi-finals in the Champions Cup, which is a first for the side, Quins have actually had a couple of seasons of lacklustre performance, following what was quite an unlikely Premiership title win. I think a lot of people have overlooked that Quins actually came fourth in the regular season that season, and they had to pull off tremendous upsets and turnaround games against Bristol and Exeter on their way to lifting the title. And I think that was just pre the COVID sort of era. So yeah, it's been a couple of seasons, during COVID era. So yeah, it's been a couple of seasons since they've hit that sort of height. But even when they did hit that sort of height, it wasn't like a vintage sort of style season. The league was obviously about to go through a process of a lot of restructuring, and there's been issues ever since, and some big salary cap changes and such. But they're a side that were pulled together with really a dynamic, attacking flair, which would be a very exciting side. But this year they're likely to finish either 7th or 8th. Following 2 consecutive seasons outside of the top 4, and I think both they finished 6th, so this has actually been a decline for them. In prior seasons too, the Premiership triumph as well, they finished 6th, 5th, 10th, so they created a bit of a reputation for being very inconsistent on paper, despite having this relatively consistent game plan or culture on the pitch. Harlequins have also confirmed 13 players to be leaving at the end of the season as well, including some big highlight names. Dylan Lewis is going to be leaving, Dino Lamb, Lennox and Yamwu, that was obviously confirmed right at the start of the season. Will Joseph could be a big loss, but obviously he's not getting much game time there. They've made an interesting start to their squad restructuring so far. From what I know, they've announced Stu Townsend, who will be joining as that sort of older statesman, replacing that Danny Care type and supporting Will Porter with his expedited growth. I think that's a good signing. He's not had an amazing season, but obviously he's a Prem winner and comes with bags of experience. He's 29, turning 30, so he's the right sort of age profile to take over that, like not too old that you're going to have to be thinking about moving him on so soon. And he's obviously English too, that helps with qualification. They also have Harry Williams returning. I think they've already confirmed as well. He's joining from a couple of unusual years with Powell. Powell have been a good side. Obviously, he's a massive bloke, so he'll be adding a lot of weight to that front row, potentially being like an interim style Will Collier type of replacement. Guido Petty and Kieran Treadwell are also joining the side to replace Herbst, who's going, and like I said, Lamb, who's already announced to be going. I think Guido Petty's a great player. Treadwell, I haven't seen enough of to really have a measured opinion on. But I think if we're talking about structuring, I think it is a little bit of a downgrade because I think the average age is 30 across those two. So it's not really contributing to the future of the side, and it sort of adds into this collective of sort of older locks that they've had for a while. And actually, on the subject of average age, the average age of all the signings coming through the front door right now is 31, whereas the age of those outgoing is 28.2. So it's not a great look in terms of future-proofing the squad and the side, meaning that it's not necessarily a sign of a rebuild for them, but rather an intention to perform right now. So do I think they have the capability to do so next season with the current crop of players that they have? And it sort of depends really for me on how they address the issues that they've had to address for a number of years. Because there's, plenty of attacking talent in that side. They know how to score points. They have, superstars within their side, which will, they're a very well followed club. But I do think, these issues have been ongoing. So when you think of Harlequins, you obviously think of free-flowing rugby, high try counts, very impressive or depressing score lines, depending on which side they fall on. However, Quins have really struggled this year to match the consistency of the try-scoring ability of sides ahead of them in the league. They actually rank outside of the top 5 for tries scored this season, over 30 tries off of the likes of Bath and Bristol. They also rank outside of the top 6 for points scored this season, despite Marcus Smith's improved boot. I think he came under criticism, obviously, during that England tour, but his boot's definitely been improving. They do, however, kick the second most in the league, ahead of more pragmatic sides like Bath and Sale. And they do feature in the top 5 tackle counts this season as well, meaning that Quins might sort of pass the vibe check when it comes to the way that they attack, but actually have been forced to do much more out of possession so far this year. Now, if we actually compare Quins to who are likely to finish in that 4th place position in Sale, Quins have made over 300 more carries than Sale this season, over 1,100 metres more, that's a ton more, over 33 more clean breaks, massive numbers here, over 100 more defenders beaten, yet they sit 10 tries adrift. From Sale, and nearly 100 points scored off of Sale as well. So this proves to a lack of execution in this side's attack, despite excellent talents out there, out wide in particular, like Caden Murley. But yeah, it's far from the wingers' fault, as where Quins really fall down is in handling errors, and discipline as well has been a problem this season. Quins have actually conceded more yellow cards than the likes of Northampton, Bath and Sale, and their handling error count is right towards the top of the league, in the top 3 of the league. That isn't a problem in itself, but their heat map of handling errors is weighted within their own 22 and their opposition's 22, 2 places you absolutely need to be way more clinical in. And with the talent available, I think this points to potentially a poor coaching point, as either their shape forces too much play, their players' positioning is creating too many issues for cohesive phase play, or they haven't got the sort of pragmatism to understand when chances are on and off, which is often levied, I think, a little bit unfairly at Marcus Smith. So Danny Wilson, so that's the sort of elephant in the room for me. Danny Wilson is a good coach, with a good early track record within his career, particularly what he did with that Wales under-20 setup. However, his time at Glasgow was largely disappointing, with an 8th place finish in 2021-22, and they also suffered that record-breaking quarter-final loss to Leinster, where they lost by sort of 60, 70 points, which only hurt their reputation further, or his reputation further, sorry. He's achieved some impressive things at Quins, and that win against Bordeaux last year, which as of today has aged fantastically and will be a historic marker for the club. However, I do think it's about time that we take a look to see who else is out there, and I think they are likely to move him on this season. I have 2 major suggestions, though, on who I would be interested in appointing for the Harlequins head coach role. The first being Stuart Lancaster. And I know Lancaster has become kind of unfairly, again, a bit of a Marmite name within rugby circles and within the sort of global coaching community, blah, blah, blah. But I think this is a unique situation in which the cultures match really nicely between coach and side. Lancaster obviously comes with massive pedigree, with a Champions Cup win and 4 Pro 14 titles to his name, including the likes of 4 consecutive Calcutta Cups, which again that's aged really really well, a Triple Crown, and 3 Churchill Cups as well when he was back when they used to run that Saxons competition. However, his fallout at Racing is kind of unsurprising, and culturally at the time it didn't make much sense for me as to why the two parties had ever decided on each other. Lancaster is an elite player developer. We all know that. You hear a lot about how good he is as a man manager, and having operated in that very role on a national scale. And it's why the current Leinster team have had so many seamless upgrades from their academy players into their annual playing squad. And what he lacks a little bit in management of the superstars, and he absolutely makes up for with a pragmatic approach to squad development and isolating the improvement of basics, which is really, really important for Quins right now. Harlequins are in desperate need of a better defence, more cohesive attacking shapes, maybe better leadership of their younger players as well. And I think Lancaster, with a winning track record domestically and a focus on the youth, might be the right sort of guy for the role. But the second name, which I'd like to put forward, is actually Graham Rowntree. Rowntree was obviously part of that same England coaching setup that Lancaster led back in the day. But he's gone on to have a really interesting career so far. Since he departed that England national setup, he actually became Quins' new forwards coach between 2016 and 2018, fans will remember, before joining the Georgian national side, which was a big move at the time. And we saw real improvements to the likes of Joe Marler and Will Collier during those periods, including the emergence of some new talents as well. But he also did really well in that short stint with Georgia, despite having a pretty forgettable World Cup campaign. A lot of the modern Georgian attacking influence is based on what he brought to the side. And again, talents were reared during that time. The Georgia that we see now is a far more improved product because of people like him who are involved in that setup. But it was at Munster where I think Rowntree did really impress as he replaced Van Graan after a bit of a middling spell when he obviously went over to Bath. And he actually broke Munster's silverware drought in his very first season as head coach, and picked up a real sleeping giant back up to being a consistent, hard to beat contender, not just in domestically but in Europe. But despite landing a 2-year extension, Munster announced that Rowntree, by mutual agreement, was to leave the squad, and he left after 4 losses in a row, I think it was at the time. That was controversial at the time. I remember a lot of forums, breaking out and people being quite upset about the dismissal there. I think in hindsight, I still don't think it's aged fantastically. I think they've continued to be a strong outfit, but I don't think they were necessarily that much better since Rowntree leaving. They're very similar coaches, Lancaster and Rowntree, with very similar brands of rugby and man management skills. But I do tend to lean a little bit more towards Rowntree due to his existing knowledge of the club, having been there previously, and his track record of developing these sort of undercooked sides into being title contenders. Now, Quins will definitely need some reinforcements in the summer, with their centre partnership of Anyanwu and Joseph leaving. That's their secondary or even tertiary lineup. And they've only just got, I think they've got 3 players listed in their entire playing squad, being in the centres, and that's Beard, Northmore and Hyde. Yes, there's people that can do a job there, but it's not preferable. And I think Quins have also really struggled with injuries this season anyway across that back line. In particular, that centre combination, they've never really been able to get the combinations out that they would really like. Northmore has played 62% of his matches at outside centre. Beard has played 76% of his matches at outside centre. So they're both lean towards being a bit more specialised at outside centres, meaning that inside centre berth just hasn't been filled as of yet. Quids do lack a little bit of bulk in that back line, and in particular, Anyanwu's disappointing season and early contract exit has sort of meant that they're going to be overly reliant on this skinning players mentality rather than finding any Route 1 option, which I think is important for any professional side. But centres is actually a really hard one to find, those who could be on the market at the end of the season. It's one of the most locked down positions this coming season, and if you see all the issues in the England national setup as an example, trying to find inside centres, you can see as for why. Most of the contracts have already been extended into the end of the 2026 season across the Pro D2, across Super Rugby, and there's very little quality in England, available right now, as I mentioned. However, there's always been a strong Welsh connection with Harlequins, with some of their best players and coaches being from over the bridge. There is also a lot of doubt and not much money at the moment over in Welsh rugby, so there's not a lot of incentivisation for Welsh players to stay in the region or in their respective region. It's yet to be announced which region will be folding as well, but the knock-on effect of all of that is that the regions will be looking at cost-cutting measures to their squad build-up and might be looking to cut corners moving into this season. This will mean a lot of players getting out of contracts early, potentially cheaper buyouts, and a difficulty to hold on to players. I think the incentive again to play for the national setup is beginning to diminish a little bit. So a player that I'd really like to put forward is Owen Watkin. He seems like he'd be a solid starter for this Harlequin side. And at 28 years old, he's coming in to his peak with a lot of rugby still to give. He's one of the largest centres out there at the moment. He's 6'2", 17 stone and a half, and has current international pedigree, and he always plays really well for Wales as well. There's no news on a contract extension for him as of yet, or as to what I can find, and we're unlikely to hear one for a little while because the way the Welsh conduct business seems to be last minute. But Ospreys have had a relatively disappointing season, like Quins. Watkin could make for an excellent sort of foil for this very lightweight Quins backline as a defensive focal point and a big ball carrier to straighten up when play is required. Out of all those out of contract this season, I think he's got the best track record. He's played at the highest level and has had the most playing time available as well. He's also spent a significant amount of his career at outside centre too, should another deputy be required, which isn't really out of the purpose when it comes to how injury prone this Quins side is. Now, going into this Fixing Your Club, a lot of Quins fans were very interested in who I would put forward at lock options, despite already signing 2 locks. And I think with the aging and injury prone Launchbury becoming more of a squad player, and we're going to see him feature less and less, and the loss of 2 starters, the incoming players fit the overall squad well, but they wouldn't be my tried and tested Premiership quality first round picks. Now, I would have loved to have said somebody like Freddie Clark would be a great choice because he's had a really good season with Gloucester, and he's one of those incredibly unlucky players who, as it stands, is not being extended. But at 32 years old, and with the other 2 30-year-olds coming in, it feels a little bit short-sighted for me, and not particularly wise squad building to bring him in. So the player that I'd be really looking at, he's a giant of a player, and currently playing for the impressive Pro D2 side Colomiers, is Yanzi Roux. So the 6'7", 20 stone South African has started 10 from 17 available matches this season. He's clocked in over 840 minutes in the league. He is out of contract as it stands, or at least I can't see anywhere that says his contract's being extended at the end of the season. He's only 27 years old, so he's got a bit of time. That's approaching peak era locks, but he's still got a bit of time to go. And you're getting a player who's obviously going to be coming into that prime with potentially 5 years left to give. I think he's ready for a step up. I think he's a real enforcer. I think he's a great line-out option. A player like him could be a real sort of hipster pick to lift this Quins side physicality. A lot will depend on whether his side managed to find themselves in a playoff to reach the top 14. I don't think they have. But an early pre-contract arrangement could make a world of difference here. I do also think that Quins will need some reinforcements for that front row, with the average age growing within the side. An understudy will be required as well for Harry Williams, who's had some injury problems in his past. Baxter is obviously absolutely ironed on when it comes to loosehead. And being so young, he's probably one of the most valuable players in the league right now. And Quins have 2 seasoned veterans at tight head. A seasoned stand-in for covering injuries, I think, will be important moving into next season, and in international periods as well. So I think it would be a really necessary pickup for Quins, maybe needing more diversity of options at loosehead. Thierry Paiva would be a really interesting rotation option for me, a really interesting person to bring into the mix when his contract comes up at the end of this season. In 9 matches, which he's played, he's only started 2 games. He's only clocked up 260 minutes, which will be a little bit of a worry. But he does, again, have a really good track record. He's had over 75 professional appearances in his career, and he's obviously played at Bordeaux. He's big, He's athletic. He's 29 years old, and at over 125 kegs and 6 foot, he'd be one of the more cheaper sort of options available on the market right now that could easily slot in for 4 or 5 games a season and offer something slightly different to this side. And yeah, he's immensely strong. He's a frightening sort of presence, and short ball carrier to handle as well. But his general fitness in a league as dynamic as the Premiership could be a bit of a worry to play anything longer than that. I do think he'd be a really low risk signing though, and with the likes of Finn Baxter and future academy talents coming through, I think it's just somebody there to shore up things for the future. But for right now, a bit of added weight and ballast wouldn't go amiss for increasing this side's physicality. And then outside of that, I haven't really got any other sort of realistic signings that I think could be pulled off this summer. I think a lot of Quins' development will be levied against how good this new coaching sort of setup, which they're going to need, meshes, how quickly they can implement those game plans within the pre-season. I don't think Quins have the budget necessarily to be going out there and buying a superstar. I think they're obviously going to be spending a fair bit of cash on Guido Petit anyway for him coming over. And like I said, these players I don't think are going to break the bank at all. I think you're seeing a lot of Premiership sides as well make maybe 6 or 7 signings going into a season, but they're losing 10, 15 at the moment, so they're quite reliant on their academy setup, and Quins will be very similar. They take a lot from the lower leagues too, and they've always done that successfully. I think, potentially you could say they might need another fullback. They've got Cameron Anderson and Tyrone Green there. Tyrone Green's obviously suffered with injuries a little bit, and they do a lot of rotation in their back three, but again, couldn't really see the options there. So I actually think, yeah, if Quins want to be fixed moving into next season, yes, these signings help shore up the squad a little bit, and I do think that Route 1 option with somebody like an Owen Watkins really, really important. But a lot of it's going to have to come off the pitch on the paddock. It's going to have to come from a better game plan to execute these dynamic plays that they have, which clearly work. They break the line a lot, they make a lot of meters, but their red zone efficiency is really, really poor. So better leadership, that might be something which they might need to look at. I mean, if I was to pick a captain maybe going into next season, it's probably going to end up, continuing to be somebody like a Don Brandt. But I do think they do need more leadership within that group. And the only other, potential possibility idea that they could bring in is somebody like a Simon Amor, who's a head coach of US Sevens at the moment. Obviously, he's done 15s before. He was at Wasps for a little bit. He was actually England attack coach during a pretty dogged time for England, but he did win a Six Nations title and an Autumn Nations Cup title. Not necessarily with super exciting attacking play, but a pragmatism there. So maybe some consultancy type advice might be helpful. But I'd be really interested to hear from Quins fans what they think about the side moving into next season, the type of signings they're looking at. Taking a look to see what the sort of contracts are available. And so if you like this video, obviously this is going to be the first of many. Make sure that you leave a like, you comment what you want to see more from this channel across all of our socials. You're going to see much more videos like this, and we're going to be bringing back things like rugby analysis, which is just going into more of a platformed type overview of each league, as well as rugby news and things like that as well. And don't forget to check out Augmento Sports and use that discount code of Scrum Recap 10 on checkout. And if you want to see more like this, make sure you subscribe.